Hello everyone, my name is Josh and welcome to WHIMS, and today I have a book review on The Hallmarked Man by Robert Galbraith, aka J.K. Rowling. Now this is the 8th book in the Cormoran Strike series, and this particular plot follows our main detective duo basically investigating. Cormoran Strike gets hired by a woman by the name of Decima Mullins, who says that she has an idea of the body that was found in the silver vault of a silver shop that sells Masonic silverware, try saying that 5 times fast, is in fact her husband, Rupert Fleetwood. And she literally has it in her bones that this could be the case, but an aunt of his who she's tried to contact several times has basically said, no, he's not in the silver vault, he's just gone on holidays, started out a new life in New York, and that'd be the end of it. But of course Decima Mullins doesn't think so. She wants to believe that he's dead. So this basically starts off a chain of events where our main detective duo of Cormoran Strike and Robin Ellacott are trying to investigate who the body in the silver vault could be and who put him there. And that's the essential plot of The Hallmarked Man. And I have to say, I liked this book because it was an interesting new direction to take the series in after we've basically just had an entire 7-book series where we basically just had one case and there's all these other little side cases more for character development and world building. Whereas in the case of The Hallmarked Man, J.K. Rowling decides to spruce things up a little bit with, the main plot of who is in the silver vault and who could have put him there. It isn't just this one case that they're investigating. It turns out that all the elements of the other cases that they're investigating, the infidelities, the scandals, the secret lives of all these different people, all converge to what's happening in the main case. And I actually really liked that. I thought that was a very interesting twist to the Cormoran Strike and Robin Ellacott formula, because it's only so long that you can take before you think, okay, we know what's going to be the main case because it's the main case that I'll do our investigating together. But I like the fact that all these other cases serve a purpose of tying everything together so that when you get to the end of the book, which is a very long time, I do apologise to everyone who was waiting for this review, but this book took me a long time to get through. And I do think that's going to actually affect how I rate this book, because there is something in this book which I don't want to give too much away with, but there was something to do with the ending where I did kind of find myself going, it kind of felt very similar to the ending of The Running Grave, where it felt like, oh, it's the same sort of big twist as the ending of The Running Grave, which is that in that book there was an entire secret society, there was kind of like an entire, reveal that the church was doing human trafficking on the side. That was the whole entire point of the last book's ending, and it kind of made me feel like, okay, so we're basically doing a version of that again, but this time with a different group of people. And it kind of felt a little bit underwhelming as a result of that, and it's a really big shame, because the book was so well written, and I really did like the fact that even though we did have a very kind of very, not really predictable, but more a kind of, oh, this feels very familiar, it felt very weird that it was such a good book and such a well-written mystery that to have that kind of, payoff, it really kind of made me feel like, oh, that's a shame, because the rest of the book was so good and so well written. So it was really, it doesn't mean that it's not well written, it still was well written, but I found myself thinking, I just wish J.K. Rowling had thought of it much more, didn't make it feel as though we were doing this again, or it felt very repetitive, because that's usually the biggest hallmark of when a sequel fails. If it feels too familiar and it feels like it's it's following too many of the same beats as the previous story or the previous film or whatever, it tends to feel very formulaic, and it doesn't tend to feel really as impactful as it should be. But I did genuinely really like the characters. I liked the reveal, but I just found myself kind of going, I really do wish there was a little bit more of a kind of, a more fresher take on it. And I feel like that was kind of one of the biggest disappointments that I had with this book. But the story was very compelling. So what this book basically is it's J.K. Rowling's version of a locked room mystery. And locked room mysteries are kind of like a hallmark of a lot of detective stories. And I just really think that a good majority of good detective stories always have a locked room mystery scenario. And one of the most famous examples in the murder mystery genre is courtesy of Agatha Christie with the novel The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which is probably one of the most famous versions of a locked room mystery, where a man is found dead in his office and there is no way the killer could have gotten in or out without using a specific key or without having known who Peter Ackroyd was, or he had to have become known to him in some way, or Peter Ackroyd had to have sort of trusted him in some way to make him, you know, enter the room and do these things. So that was the one big clue. But it's a really good mystery. I don't want to spoil who it is, because if you want to read the book and find out what the big twist is, you have to read the book for yourself, obviously. But yeah, this book was really well done. I liked how a lot of the plots tended to converge on each other. I liked how a lot of it in some way sort of ended up intersecting with the main plot, like the storyline with Plug and his activities in one of the cases. You think it's a very separate case at first, but then very slowly dots start to connect in the overall story. And then there's also another story where, as a result of what's happened in the running grave with, you know, Cormoran Strike getting in touch with Bijou Watkins and all these other things, he was able to unmask what his rival detective agency, the Patterson Inc. Corporation, were able to do. And when the entire, you know, employees of that particular branch got arrested, they all started spilling beans on all sorts of different secrets, including the liaison that he might have had with Bijou Watkins, which might have led to Bijou getting pregnant. So there's all these different things going on there, and it really is one of those instances where I thought, I'm glad J.K. Rowling's doing this, because honestly, when I read The Running Grave, it felt like, with a lot of the other plots, that it turns out that what was happening in The Running Grave was all just set up, because it turns out that a lot of the stuff that, you know, gets set up in The Running Grave ends up getting paid off in this book, because we do find ourselves sort of thinking, okay, this is what it's building to. But what I really like as well is there's a lot of secrets that get revealed as a result of this as well, and I really do like that. I like the fact that there is a little bit of a surprise in, you know, the way this book, you know, ties together. And I do think it's actually a really fascinating book, and I do think it's well worth the read, but I do think that the actual payoff for the big mystery, the big Hallmarked Man mystery, was actually kind of a little bit repetitive to me. I felt like they could have... I wanted a little bit more bite at the end of the story, because the setup for the story, the actual investigation and the clues was actually very well done. I just wish that there was a little bit more that could have been done with it. But let me just say, the actual reveal was actually one of those moments where I found myself going, I really just think it could have done with a few more, you know, rewrites, because I feel like this is a good story, and I feel like what this book says about what it means to be a man in today's world is actually really refreshing, because usually with a lot of stories today, they always tend to depict how not very great it is to be a man in today's world, in today's, you know, society, with all this negativity, all these other things. But I'm glad that J.K. Rowling could have explored all aspects of what it means to be a man in today's society, and the warts and all aspect to it. It just felt like a very refreshing, you know, change of pace in the entire series as well. And what's going on with our main duo? Well, I'm going to talk about the TV series a little bit for this one, but I am really happy that they are starting to, you know, restart to form a relationship. Even though I was against it in the beginning, I did feel like with the advent of the TV series and the casting of Holliday Grainger and Tom Burke, I was immediately on board, because I found myself going, it's insane how good... how much good chemistry these two actors have together. So it would feel kind of like a bit of a shame if they didn't get together. But originally, when I first read the series, I didn't really see them as a couple. I saw them more as a perfect detective duo. They worked very well as a duo of people who investigated these crimes, and they both complemented each other with how they worked. And I like the fact that Robin was a character who had a bit of a past, but we didn't really know much about it, and then as the series went on, we found out obviously what that is. And it's actually really nice, and I'm one of the very few people in this book who actually likes Ryan Murphy. Everyone hates him because they want Cormoran and Robin to get together, but I'm one of the very few people who actually liked him. But I think maybe my judgment of the character could be in how he's portrayed in the TV series. He's much more, you know, dorkish and likeable and kind of sweet and charming in that very kind of almost Hugh Grant kind of way, where it's like, you know, he could be kind of putting it on, but part of it just feels like he's so charming in how he does it that it's kind of like almost irresistible almost. And don't even get me started on Barclay. Like, Barclay in the TV series is hot. Like, he is absolutely gorgeous. So, yes, I was thinking all sorts of things that I shouldn't have been thinking when I was watching his scenes in the TV series. But yeah, enough of that tangent, because I don't want to traumatise any of my viewers. But yes, I was thinking all sorts of things when I was thinking of Barclay in the TV series. But yes, him and Ryan Murphy, I wouldn't mind seeing them two together. But yeah, this book was really wonderful. I do think the ending was a little bit underwhelming though, but I overall really enjoyed it. And let me just say, there's this one character who got introduced in the sort of latter half of the book. I had the same feeling as I did with the culprit in the Ink Black Heart, where I thought as soon as he was introduced, I thought, yep, that's him. And I never usually get that, because usually whenever I watch murder mysteries on television, I never usually get it. Like, whenever I watch Poirot or Inspector Morse or any other kind of murder mystery, I never usually get who the culprit is. I always try to follow the clues very closely, and I always end up getting it wrong. But I like the fact that I'm getting it right. I'm always like going, yep, that's probably him. But I like the twists and turns, and I like the fact that J.K. Rowling is still able to fool you as a writer as well, with how she puts clues in. And I like how characters from the previous books come back. I like the fact that when Strike is going undercover in a party with one of the people from his agency, Kim Cochran, who is the spawn of the devil in this book, not literally, but she is in terms of how she behaves. But there's a moment where he runs into an ex of his called Lacelia, I think that's how you say her last name. I'm sorry if I mispronounced her surname. But yes, she returns, and she was famous for being in the Silkworm, for passing off a bit of news to Culpeper about, you know, the various different things. Or I think it was something to do with the Owen Quine case. And it's actually a very interesting... it was very nice to see that another character from another book in the series came back. I literally thought, when I was reading this book, I thought, Strike's literally going to be like Frasier Crane, isn't he? Like in that episode of Frasier, where he sort of like envisions in his head all his ex-wives and all his ex-girlfriends, like Lilith and all these other people coming into his life and talking to him and saying, you need to get your shit together, Frasier, in a manner of speaking. I thought that was what was going to happen here. I thought, you know, Lorelei and all these other characters like Madeline and all these other exes of Cormoran Strike were going to come in and say, you need to get your shit together and tell Robin how you feel. And speaking of Robin, she gets put through the ringer in this particular book. I mean, I literally felt so sorry for Robin this time round. And one of the things that I really was going to say was a massive criticism for the Running Grave, I no longer have a criticism for, because in the Hallmarked Man, they actually do reference that after her time in the cult, she suffers nightmares and hallucinations due to her experiences in the cult. And I like that, because it shows that Robin is human and she has a lot of shit to deal with in her own life, as well as what's happening in the detective agency. And I like the fact that even though Ryan Murphy isn't a perfect person, I do like the fact that he actually does understand Robin on some level. He doesn't always they don't always 100% get each other or see eye to eye, but I do like the fact that Ryan Murphy does actually talk to her, and he does actually try to understand her and try to, you know, talk to her on her own level, as opposed to assuming that this is what she thinks and what she believes. And I do really think that they have a good relationship. I just know, because of the nature of this book series, that it's probably not going to last for very long, and it's a shame, because he is actually a genuinely much better guy than Matthew is. But honestly, I wouldn't touch Matthew with a barge pole in regards to how he treated Robin in those earlier books. But I do think what's very interesting is that they feel like a real couple. They don't feel like, oh, they're just having arguments for the sake of drama or for the sake of a page count, because this book is huge. So the fact that J.K. Rowling put in a lot of scenes where they're arguing, it didn't feel like it was just doing it to reach a boiling point so that we can get to the big reveal that, oh yeah, they've broken up. it felt like they were arguing because they both really cared about each other, and they really did care about where the other one was going and what the other one was doing. And yes, he did get a little bit annoying whenever he kept saying, why didn't you tell me that you were investigating the vault case? But that's because Robin is one of those people who knew that he was going to react in a very terrible way, but then how do you break the news of that to someone who is investigating this case? So it is a very complicated issue. But I really did like this book. The only thing that I kind of didn't like in regards to our main characters was the fact that Strike is deliberately trying to sabotage both Robin and Murphy's relationship because he really loves her. But part of me just feels like if you really love her, you should just let her do whatever she needs to do, Strike. Like, that's something that every person should do. But I think the fact that he's literally trying to sabotage Robin and Murphy's relationship and hoping and praying that they have a fight the next time they contact each other, that's literally Gunther levels from Friends, levels of sabotage and obsession. Like, that's something that, and trust me, as the leading man of a detective series, you don't want to be compared to excuse me, you don't want to be compared to Gunther from Friends, because honestly that's what he was giving me when I was reading this book. Like, Strike, you are meant to be the hero of this series. Don't turn into Gunther from Friends, because honestly, you're not going to be very well liked for it. But I do really like Strike in this one. I like the fact that I really did feel sorry for him when it was revealed that his Uncle Ted had died, because I thought, God damn it, J.K. Rowling, why did you have to break our hearts again? First with Joan in Troubled Blood, and now you've got, Ted from the other books of the series, just kind of, the next one to go. But the fact that he was off doing something else, he was off investigating and interviewing Decima Mullins when this revelation took place, it was really horrible to hear, because it kind of made me think of, when you're in that position where you are basically leading a very busy life and then you hear this phone call that a family member has died. It's a really horrible thing to hear. And because he was very close to his Uncle Ted, it's really horrible to think that he wasn't there to see him when he passed. And the fact that Lucy, again, who's already been through so much, has kind of like this really horrible loss to deal with, it really does kind of put you through the ringer. It kind of makes you think to yourself, can't you give these guys just one moment of happiness? But it is really horrible, especially after... I didn't really like Lucy in the beginning, or I felt like she was a little bit of a lukewarm character to me. I didn't know what to make of her. But after that revelation that she had a really horrible experience happen to her on Chapman Farm when she was younger, and she was with Leda and Strike when they were children, it really was one of those moments where it felt like I had new respect for Lucy as a character after that, because it's one of those moments where it gave her a little bit more depth and a little bit more character outside of the fact that, she's just Cormoran Strike's sister. And I really did like that. I thought that was very well done. But I feel like this book is actually very well done, and I like the fact that even though, and this is a very interesting thing that J.K. Rowling does, she does a very good job of kind of highlighting how much, and I know I'm going to use a very weird word here, how much adulting sucks, because in reality what Robin goes through in this book, like when she has an ectopic pregnancy, I think it's called, where the fallopian tube bursts while she's, out on a job, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, she may not have wanted to have children, but it's really horrible when that scenario gets lost to you or gets cut off from you. And it's a really horrible situation, because it's like you want to have that option open to you, even if you don't want to have children. It's one of those things that's very difficult to come to terms with. And the fact that, she's not behaving, like she's crying all the time and acting as though she really needed to have this done, it really kind of made me think, Robin doesn't need to act in a very stereotypically all crying sort of thing with this sort of revelation, because I feel like Robin is such a strong character, and she's one of those characters who, even if she was a parent, it's one of those things where it's very difficult to say, because you don't want to say that, this was almost like a blessing in disguise almost, because it never usually is. But what's very interesting is that Robin not being able to have children is almost a good thing in a way, because it's allowing her to focus on her work and her job, which is what she's always wanted. It kind of reminds me, and I'm going off on a lot of tangents in this review, but I feel like with this particular story, and with Robin, it kind of reminded me a lot of Christina Yang, Sandra Oh's character in Grey's Anatomy when she was getting married to Alex Burke. It reminded me of that particular episode where she's at the wedding and she's ready to go. She was doing surgery and she goes to the wedding. She's got the wedding dress on and she's ready to go. She's ready to walk down the aisle. She's happy to get married to Dr. Burke. But then he just comes through the doors and he just basically says, "What are you doing? I know this isn't you. I know." He asks her, "Are you ready?" And she says, "Yeah, of course I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get married. I'm ready to marry you. I love you." And then she goes, "But this isn't you. This isn't who you are." And there's that wonderful moment when the song "The Scientist" by Coldplay, which made me a fan of Coldplay, comes on, and she's literally walking through the apartment, and she's got the wedding dress on, and she literally just has the moment where she's looking around, and she just says repeatedly, "He's gone, he's gone, he's gone," and it's and she starts taking the wedding dress off, and she starts crying. But part of me feels like that was Christina Yang removing the straitjacket from her and saying, "I'm free to be who I am now." And that's such an empowering moment, even though it is sad, because it's Christina Yang got the chance to be whoever she was, but that's not to say, and that's what's really interesting about that scenario, because I feel like Robin's the same way here, where it's not still, just because it's something that she didn't want to happen or she didn't want for herself, that doesn't make it any more heartbreaking. So I feel like the scene where the fallopian tubes burst and she was having an argument with Ryan Murphy about it and about freezing her eggs, it's one of those things where she feels like, yes, it's something that she didn't want, but that's not going to make it any more painful to talk about. And that's something that I really do like about both. I think both Shonda Rhimes and J.K. Rowling are kind of kindred spirits in this respect, because they really do know what goes on through their female protagonists' heads, where it's they know that they want to create these very complicated figures who do want to have a normal life and settle down, but they also feel very career driven. And to a certain degree, Robin is the same as Christina Yang. I think if Christina Yang and Robin met, they would get on like a house on fire, because part of me feels like they have the same goals and they have the same aspirations. They both love their jobs, and they're both very kind of capable of doing so much more than a lot of people think of them at first. And I just thought that was a very interesting analogy. I'm sorry I went on a bit of a Grey's Anatomy tangent, but to me I just feel like that was a perfect way of describing what Robin is going through in this particular book. And I feel like when Cormoran Strike revealed at the end that he wants to marry her, I thought, I literally had, that scene in Caddyshack where everyone just starts fist palming themselves, going, and you see all these people going, doing the same thing over and over and over again. It felt like that to me. I felt like you could have chosen any other time to say, "Hey, this Cormoran." You didn't have to say it now. You could have waited. But it was one of those things where it was during the running grave when he said, she said, "She knows that I loved you." That was one of those moments where it was oh. But then it was you could have chosen any other time to say it. I get it, he wanted to get something off his chest, but part of me just feels like there were so many other ways in which you could have done that, and I feel like Cormoran Strike really could have, chosen a much more better time, or maybe even just waited until things had actually finished with her and Murphy in order to do it. I feel like him just saying that now when she was at her most vulnerable felt very kind of strange to me, and it felt like, why would... But then Cormoran is one of those people who isn't very tactful. Yes, he knows when to be tactful in terms of his profession and his job, but I feel like in terms of social, it's like the difference between being book smart and being a social smart or being street smart. People just aren't usually as good at social cues when they're book intelligent or book smart, and that's kind of the same with Cormoran, where it's Cormoran knows when to be tactful and when to step in and when to give these clues, when to give these things a lot of thought in his job, in his detection work. But when it comes to social skills, he's very kind of limp, because he hasn't had a very stable childhood, and also after that he doesn't really have that much of a stable life outside of that, which is very strange. But to me, I just think it makes him even more of a relatable character, and I feel like even though he completely and utterly shat the bed in regards to asking Robin to marry him, it really does make the next book even more interesting to talk about and even more interesting to wait for. But yeah, that's my review for The Hallmarked Man. I did like the central mystery. The payoff was a little bit in regards to the ending or the final, few pages of the main mystery, but I would give this book a 9 out of 10. This wasn't my favourite book in the series, but I definitely do think it was a great step up in regards to where we were going with the series and where we were going with a lot of the clues and the mystery. And I just hope that the book series ends on a high and we really do get a good ending for these two characters. Because with this particular book series, I know this is going to sound very strange, but this book series is actually a really lovely, really wonderful little romance series that just happens to take place as a murder mystery series as well. It's kind of like a Richard Curtis film, but done sort of like as the backdrop to a murder mystery, kind of like a Notting Hill or a, Love Actually kind of thing, where it is kind of like meant to be this very kind of interesting romance, but it's written with the perspective of real people in mind kind of thing, and that's what I really like about it as well. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my review. I'm sorry it was a bit rambly, and this was a lot of book to get through, and I do have to apologise for this late review. I had a lot of stuff going on, and also when I first got this book, I posted a picture of when I got it, so that it was marked on my community page of when I got it, how long it would be until I actually get a review out. But I actually had the plan when I first got it to read it and get it out before Halloween. That was my whole entire, objective. But as time went on, I became, more consumed by the things that I was doing that I could have just completely forgot about it on some cases. So I ended up having to pull kind of really big shifts to get this finished and make sure that, I got everything right and all the facts right and ready. And I just have to say, one of my favourite things about this book was that the guy who ended up being the adult film star, Dangerous Dick DeLeon, aka Danny DeLeon, the way he was described in the book, I kept imagining for some odd reason, and this probably might play into how he gets cast in the TV series, but if I was casting the TV series, if I was casting Dan DeLeon or Danny DeLeon, by the way, his porn name, Dangerous Dick DeLeon, is probably the best porn name I've ever heard, ever. That's amazing. But yes, I would actually cast him, if I was casting him in the TV series, as someone like Max Bowden from EastEnders, and he plays Ben Mitchell, and I would actually cast him as Danny DeLeon, because part of me just thinks he is just such a gorgeous man, and of course, Danny DeLeon is such a gorgeous guy, so it's like, obviously I would choose him, but that's just me. I have a huge crush on Max Bowden, so of course, obviously I would choose him. But yes, I absolutely love him, especially with the moustache. Like, my God, when he appeared on Loose Women and he had that moustache, I thought, oh God, just take me now, Max. He was so handsome. But yeah, I really do love him, and I hope he gets. If they don't cast him as that, I hope they cast him as someone, really gorgeous as well. But yeah, he was one of my favourite characters to read about, because he was just a really fascinating character. He was a little bit troubled, of course, as well, but one of the characters who I genuinely did feel like, oh, there's something not right about him, my radar was going all over the place, was the character of Ian Griffith. And he was one of those characters that made me think he has a bit of a Lord Summerisle vibe to him, kind of, where it's like, you think he's going to be, someone trustworthy or someone interesting, but there's always a bit of layering that's peeled back, and I think that's very interesting. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed my review for The Hallmarked Man. Sorry this was so late, but I hope you're all doing very well, and my next review will be coming out hopefully on my birthday, which is on the 18th of this month. So I hope you're all doing very well. Take care, bye-bye for now.